Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, everyone. May I have your attention, please? I would like to welcome you all here at Islamabad Policy Institute, IPI, today. My name is Mubin Jafar Mir and I am a research assistant at IPI. IPI and Palestine Foundation of Pakistan are today jointly conducting a webinar titled Arab-Israel Normalization Implications for Muslim Unity. The aim of this meeting is to talk about some new political developments that are currently underway in the region. Of course, you will be well aware of a fresh trend where a number of Gulf states, namely the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, have decided to normalize relations with Israel, and others have, to some extent, given hints to do so in the future. Today's webinar is also a timely effort by our team, since today, on September 15, a grand ceremony at the White House is taking place, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the foreign ministers of the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are signing peaceful treaties for formally establishing diplomatic relations. IPI and Palestine Foundation of Pakistan believe these developments are a body blow to the decades-long efforts aimed at reaching on a final solution of the Palestinian crisis on the basis of UN resolutions and other regional peace initiatives. Many Islamic states, including Turkey, Malaysia, and Iran, have condemned these developments, deeming them as wild efforts aimed at undermining unity among the Muslim Ummah. On the contrary, many Islamic states have maintained silence on the moves. It lends credence to the hearsay that there are two opposite blocs emerging in the Muslim world. So today's webinar would deliberate upon the implications of these moves on the future of the Muslim world, especially the unresolved issue of Palestine statehood. We would discuss about roles of different regional states and foreign policy options available to play a constructive role for overcoming the challenges confronted by the Muslim world. I would request Chief Executive IPI Professor Sajjad Bukhari to deliver his welcome remarks. Professor Sajjad Bukhari.
Distinguished speakers, worthy panelists and participants, Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to another webinar by Islamabad Policy Institute on yet another extremely important development that would have far-reaching implications for the region and beyond. It would in great extent define the unity of Ummah in foreseeable future and the prospects of Muslim countries taking a common position on issues of concern to them. Today's webinar has coincided with signing of the agreements between Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Particularly grateful to the speaker from Palestine, Lebanon, Turkey, and Iran who have joined us in this webinar. I would like to make a few observations before experts participating in today's discussion can look at the issue threadbare. It is well known that the development has not taken place all of a sudden. There were clear signs, there were clear signals of such a thing happening since 2016. Therefore, it was a matter of time when the announcement was ultimately made. Even if you were to go as back as the start of this year, the two countries signing the normalization agreements with Israel, I mean UAE and Bahrain, plus the country that has welcomed these accords, that is Oman, were together present at the White House on January 28th on the occasion of unveiling of the so-called deal of the century. The foremost consideration for the Arab country in striking these deals is to promote their rulers in the eyes of the West as responsible
खत्म
and
होता है इससे आपको नहीं पता
they are also eyeing a new regional order they are also eyeing a new regional order in which they can foster greater cooperation with Israel against their common regional foe, that is Iran. Of course, there are economic considerations as well, but those are of secondary nature. The major challenge that these Arab rulers are likely to face in materializing this normalization agreement would be the legitimization of the erstwhile enemy, that is Israel, before their publics. They would have ideally wanted a sort of progress on Palestine dispute to have provided them a facade for normalizing, but that did not happen. The deal of the century is now a dead document. Therefore, the Arab rulers, at least in their calculations, have de-linked Arab-Israeli normalization and progress on the Israeli-Palestinian track. The message from the Arab capitals for the Palestinian fighting Israel is that their cause is no more central to them. The categorical rejection by 1967 Arab League Summit of Peace, Recognition and Negotiation with Israel till resolution of Palestine, resolution of Palestine dispute has now been consigned to the dustbin of the history. The Arab states are now more preoccupied with their and Israel's common enemy and their internal pressures. It is unclear how much the Arab states benefit from normalizing with Israel. The example of Egypt and Jordan are before them. However, the main beneficiaries for now are President Donald Trump, who is running for another term in the White House, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who is facing corruption charges and allegation of mismanaging COVID-19 pandemic. ITI welcomes government of Pakistan resolve on not considering any suggestion for development of ties with Israel unless there is an establishment of a viable, independent, and contiguous state of Palestine. on the basis of internationally agreed parameters. That is the pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds, Al-Sharif as its capital. I would once again like to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm looking forward to an enlightened discussion ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sajjad Bukhari. You have raised many pertinent points. You talked about Pakistan's stance and challenges to those states who are legitimizing these peace treaties while ignoring Palestine issue. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our honored guests to the attendees of the webinar. Moving towards our today's panelists, I am sure you all know Professor Sajjad Bukhari, who is the founder of the Islamabad Policy Institute. He is currently heading IPI as its executive director. Then I would like to move towards our first distinguished guest, who is Dr. Kahyan Barsigar, who has joined us from Islamic Republic of Iran. Dr. Kahyan Barsigar has taught as an associate professor of international relations at Islamic Azad University and has served as a fellow Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. He is a Middle East expert. And then comes our next worthy speaker from Turkey, Dr. Levent Bastard. Dr. Bastard is a Turkey-based professor and foreign policy expert. He closely follows regional and global developments and gives his insights on the political issues. Then our next distinguished speaker is Dr. Khalid Kadumi, who has joined us from Palestine. Dr. Kadumi is an eminent leader of the Islamic resistance movement Hamas. Then respected Dr. Ibrahim Musavi, who is an eminent journalist and also member of Lebanese Parliament. He is also with us and he has joined us from Lebanon. Then we are joined by Mr. Sagar Abu Maryam, who is the head of Palestine Foundation of Pakistan. And then our next guest is Mr. Ali Meher, sitting next to me, who heads the only Islamabad-based Pakistan media outlet Prime News. He is an expert at Pakistan Arab Affairs, and he has also taught at International Islamic University of Islamabad for 12 years. Then our last speaker for today's webinar is Dr. Masood Shahjareh, who is a renowned author and chairman of Islamic Human Rights Commission. Let's start with the agenda of today's webinar meeting. I will set the ball rolling by asking our respected panelist, Dr. Ibrahim Musli, a short question. It is because Dr. Musli has to attend a parliament session soon afterwards, so we will take his deep insights on the recent developments before he sets out. Welcome, Dr. Musli. I will start today's webinar by asking a small question from you. As we know that Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki has demanded that why an emergency meeting of the Arab League Council at the ministerial level was objected to after the deal was announced last month. Considering the UAE-Israel deal was an earthquake that undermines joint Arab action. Bahrain has clearly objected the wordings of the draft, and it was also the first state to welcome UAE-Israel normalization. What are the factors that are causing the Arab states to incline more and more towards Israel in the recent past, and what is the stance of Lebanon towards it? Okay, so he's not. Oh, unfortunately, our speaker from Lebanon is not here with us. So we will move towards our next speaker, who is now I would request Dr. Kahyan Barsigar to enlighten us. And it has just come to our notice that he has also some prior commitments and he would take his leave from the webinar afterwards. So I would ask Dr. Barsigar about Iranian position, like So, what do you think? What are the main factors that have caused the UAE and Bahrain to rush for establishing peace treaties with Israel? Some analysts believe that a united front against Iran is being instituted, while others maintain that it is an effort aimed at wiping out the traces of Muslim Brotherhood. What are your views about it, sir?
Okay, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this very timing and interesting conference. I believe that this situation will bring a new division in the Arab world. And of course, we know that, Iran and Turkey condemned this effort because they thought that this will add to the current situation of extremism and terrorism by division between in the Arab world and at the same time in the Islamic world. Uh, if I could put it in the historical context, it is important to understand that, first of all, two countries 4 decades ago, i.e., Egypt and Jordan, joined uh, this peace process because the Israeli regime thought that by this, peace effort, it could somehow win the heart and mind of the Arab street. It wanted to get to some kind of sustainable security. But this has not happened after 4 decades. We had a lot of intifada, a lot of wars,
I think there is some issue with the internet. So you may continue. I think I can hear you now. Hello, Dr. Kehan Basigar, can you hear me? Am I audible to anyone here? Hello?
yes,
Yes,
I
sir.
was saying that. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, technology is somehow, ups and downs and bring us some challenges. I wanted to put it in the historical context that how the two countries of Egypt and Jordan tried to get to peace with Israel, and it was unsuccessful. And that was the first wave of peace efforts by these two countries. By then, the Israeli never won the mind and heart of the Arab street, uh, and uh, and I think it is important to understand that this second wave of kind of compromise between, Israel and countries like UAE and Bahrain, I think will not be succeeded because the Arab streets and public are not ready. And I think this would be artificial, whatever they have in their mind. I mean, the elites and regimes of these countries, I don't think the public will accept this in the long term. This is a short term, kind of compromise. We know that Trump administration wanted to somehow show a kind of successful foreign policy, and he at last, resorted to this solution. He was not able to somehow succeed in his, effort in talking with Iran with the nuclear deal. He needed some kind of successful way of showing to the American people that his regional policy is somehow uh, is going well. Therefore, I think this second wave of Arab compromise, Arab conservative regimes compromise with Israel will not get to anywhere because the issue of Israel and its violent presence in the regional context is somehow institutionalized in the public of the Arab spirit. And it doesn't matter it is Egypt or it's Jordan. In the Persian Gulf countries also people have negative, perspective towards the Israelis' policy uh, in the region. A lot of intervention, bringing the foreign forces in the region, especially America, and of course, the end result of the Israeli regime for finding sustainable peace will not uh, get to anywhere. That's why I believe that it's artificial. Of course, we know that Turkey and Iran condemn this intensively. This will impact on Iran's sense of strategic insecurity from America and its ally in the region and will complicate Iran's and UAE relations in the future. Our Chief of Staff, Major General Bagheri, mentioned that this will change the entire calculus of Iran's strategic defense strategy, and Iran will change its behavior towards UAE. Therefore, I believe that in the context of social matters, economic matters, strategic matters, and political matters, this will bring a lot of division between the regional countries and at the same time add to extremism in the region and will divide the unity of the Islamic world. And I also believe that this is an artificial thing and will not last in the long term. Perhaps these conservative regimes thought that this will have a kind of domino effect and will bring up other states of the region to join this kind of, uh, you know, um, coalition. But at the same time, we have the public of the region and Islamic countries. They have condemned this harshly, and I think that this is very much important. I tell you something. A few years ago, the issue of Israel and enmity with Iran was not that much institutionalized as it is in the Arab world and Arab street. But right now, because of the policies of Israel in dealing with the nuclear deal, all the sanctions that the Israelis lobbies are behind it, and assassinating Iranian scientists, the issue of atomic scientists, the issue of Israel is becoming institutionalized also in Iranian public as well. And in Turkey also, there are very strong anti-Israeli sentiment. Therefore, the region is not ready for such kind of, compromise between, regional countries and Israel. If Israel thinks that by these kind of efforts could get to a kind of sustainable peace, I don't think it will be successful because the public is not ready. I leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kehran Bazegar, for your very pertinent remarks. You talked about different Arab waves and nuclear deal, and you talked about strategic insecurity of Iran and how it would actually give rise to extremism in the region. Thank you for your deep comments. Now I would move towards, now I would ask a question from Dr. Levent Bastard. Doctor, how does Turkey views these developments? I mean, on one hand, we have seen Turkey condemning these developments. There is, of course, a positive response to salvage the dignity of the Muslim world. But on the contrary, Ankara continues to enjoy bilateral relations with Israel. Don't you think there exists a dichotomy in Turkish foreign policy discourse? How Turkey weighs her foreign policy priorities towards Israel and the Muslim world in the future?
Let me start first by saying that thank you very much for having me to discuss this very important recent development in our region. Actually, I should say, well, Turkey's, yes, Turkey's situation, Turkey has a very delicate situation in this particular problem, because from the beginning, Turkey actually is the first Muslim country recognized Israel in 1949. Although after the incidents of Mavi Marmara, where 9 or 10 Turkish citizens were killed by the Zionist soldiers or aggressors, for a short period of time, Turkey cut all kind of diplomatic relationship with Israel. And many in the West interpreted the situation as a result of Recep Tayyip Erdogan's Islamist politics in Turkey and also in foreign policy. But actually, Erdogan's Islamism, or whether he has an Islamist position or not, that's a matter of discussion. But we can say that his approach to Middle East is different from previous governments, and he wants to be wants to play more dominant role in the region, and wants to act as a regional power. But this short period of time, between Israel and Turkey without diplomatic relationship, ended in 2016 by signing of a normalization agreement with Israel again. And diplomatic relationship, again, both countries start to have diplomatic relationship at ambassador level. And when Turkish government was trying to justify this situation at that time, actually the arguments they have used was not very convincing for Erdogan's popular support base as well. Because at that time, Turkish government did not actually hesitate to say that, well, actually, well, we might have some problems in the past, but in the end, Turkey and Israel are allies. They are part of Western alliance system, and both countries are actually friends. So it is the benefit of both countries to end this conflict and start to have diplomatic relations again. But it didn't again take long. After Trump's initiative to recognize Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel, Turkey didn't accept this. And as a result of argument or conflict with the Israeli government, Turkey this time didn't cut diplomatic relationship entirely, but right now in Tel Aviv, Turkey doesn't have an ambassador. So actually reduced the level of diplomatic relationship. On the one side, Turkey and Israel continue to have some political conflicts. However, the trade relationship, commercial relationship in both countries are continuing to increase. So this year, again, actually 2009, again in comparison to previous year, Turkey recorded increased trade volume, increased economic commercial relationship with Israel. So Turkey's situation is really sometimes it is not the Turkey's rhetoric policy sometimes is not consistent with its policies. I should say that. However, on the other side, there are some serious, of course, disagreements. One of them is Turkey's position vis-a-vis the Palestinian question. And for sure, under the rule of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey took more positive attitude toward Palestine, and actually even sometimes try to act like the protector of the Palestinians. However, on the other side, Turkey stick with the two-state solution, which is in reality, right now, it is doubtful that this policy, Palestinian question can be really resolved by negotiating or working on a two-state solution. Turkey still stick with this position because it considers that it is the position of the international community. On the other side, of course, on the issue of Jerusalem and also on the issue of Gaza, Turkey continues to be very critical, and this criticism disturbs the Israeli government. But more than that, actually, what bothered both Israelis and also the Gulf countries, Turkey's approach towards the Arab uprisings in the end of 2010 and 2011. Turkey took very activist position in those uprisings and supported those uprisings, even the one in Bahrain. Turkey, in comparison to others, gave a, well, actually the support for the Bahrain uprising was very light in comparison to others, but even for that one raised some criticism against the Bahraini government and also other Gulf countries. But with respect to what happened in Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, and other places, Turkey took an activist position, even to a certain extent acted like he can be a role model for the region. And in Egypt, with the Ikhwani Muslims, Muslim Brothers election victory, things turned to take a different shape. Turkey acted like between Egypt and Turkey through the connection of Muslim Brotherhood can create an access. And this situation actually was not liked by other regional actors such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, because those countries actually perceived a threat in Arab uprisings because of the notion of alternation of power through elections and democratic and civil rights and freedoms, freedom of speech. You know, those concepts were a threat to the authoritarian, both through authoritarian Republican regimes in the region, and also those absolutist monarchies of the Gulf countries. Except Qatar, they took a different position for their own purposes. But I should say, Brother Kayhan Barzegar explained us why they are disturbed by Iran's presence in the region. But you know that there's a rift emerged after the Iranian revolution between the Gulf countries and Iran, and also this rift start to be wider after the Iraqi after regime change in Iraq and alternation of power through the election, because it changed the system of power in Iraq. That the Gulf countries perceived this situation as against their regional interests, and because they considered Iraq shifted towards Iran more than other Arab countries. And with the Arab uprising, they pursued a second threat, and this threat is both ideological and also in terms of regime reasons. Because Arab uprisings were demanding a kind of democratic norm of form of government with alternation of power through elections, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of press, rule of law, and some other things. And plus, coming to Muslim Brothers coming to power or coming to power as a part of a coalition was also perceived as a threat by the Gulf countries, because Muslim Brothers was considered as an ideological challenge for them. And Turkey saw an opportunity in this situation and acted different from the other Gulf countries. That's why there is a conflict, or there is a tension between Turkey's relationship with those Arab countries as well, Gulf Arab countries as well. Only for a short period of time, between 2014 and 17, Turkish-Saudi Arabian relations start to get stronger due to their common interest in Syria vis-a-vis the Iranian presence over there. But they didn't take long because of the siege of Qatar by Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and also Egypt. That's why this current agreement between United Arab Emirates and Israel, United States, and also Bahrain joined it. Possible that Oman, Sudan, and later on Saudi Arabia and Morocco are going to join them as well. Maybe some of them will take a little long, some of them will be acting faster. But one reason for this agreement, in the perception of Turkish government, also in the perception of the Turkish public opinion, actually the target of this agreement was not only Iran, but also Turkey. Turkey's strong reaction to this agreement is both because of the Palestinian situation and also because of the perception that it was against itself too, because especially with United Arab Emirates right now, and also with against Saudi Arabia, as you know, Turkey is supporting the government in Tripoli, United Nations-backed government in Tripoli in Libya, and this government is fighting against the Tobruk House of Representatives government and Khalifa Haftar, so-called rogue general, and supported by United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So in future, actually, I would say that I'm thinking that this agreement actually will evolve into a regional alliance. It's not going to stay just an agreement between 2 or 3 countries. It's going to evolve a regional alliance. And it mostly, of course, it will change Iran's perception of threat. It will be against toward it, but also it will be against Turkey. It will also aim at restraining Turkey's regional ambitions. That's why I am expecting that in future, the reaction of the Arab street and the reaction of the Palestinians, the continuation of resistance, will also shape Turkey's approach in this issue. And if there is going to be a strong reaction in the streets and also from the Palestinians, I believe that Turkey will be on the supporting side of those popular demand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Basu, for your very comprehensive and detailed presentation. You talked about many pertinent points, like how the present government under President Erdogan is following totally different approach than previous governments. Then you talked about how Turkey advocates 2-state solution of Palestine, and then you talked about how Turkish and Arab interests were momentarily for small time they were shared in Syria, and then you talked about commercial relations. Thank you very much for your detailed presentation. With this, now we will move towards our next speakers. But before we proceed further, I would request our worthy panelists to restrict their insights to 4 to 5 minutes so we can go around taking everyone's perspective for boosting a healthy discussion on the issue. Um, my next question is from Dr. Khalid Looni. My question would be about the unity of the Arab world. Hamas has clearly termed these moves a backstep to the Palestinian cause. Recently, at the Arab League meeting, Palestine presented a draft resolution that condemned UAE-Israel normalization deal. But the Arab states voted it down. There are reports that Palestine Liberation Organization PLO is considering to leave the Arab League. Until now, the Arab states had maintained that they would consider bilateral relations with Israel only if a permanent solution of Palestine is achieved. But now they are shaking hands, leaving Palestine in the lurch. How do you view its implications on the Palestine cause and the region in general? Okay, so I will move to our next speaker, Mr. Sabir Abu Mariam, who heads the Palestine Foundation of Pakistan. UAE ambassador has just written a column in a Pakistani newspaper where he has mentioned that around 27 like-minded Muslim states have not criticized the UAE move. Though IK has on numerous occasions opposed the idea of normalizing relations with Israel, and it is very clear position of our Prime Minister Imran Khan, yet we have not seen much strict condemnation of the move from Islamabad. Do you think it can create challenges for Pakistan and its future diplomatic outreach? And what steps should Pakistan take to alleviate the sufferings of Palestinians right now?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Voice is audible. Thank you. Your question, before to reply your question, I would like to appreciate your efforts, Islamabad Policy Institutes, and all of your team. And I pay my greetings to all of the distinguished participants of this webinar. Regarding the challenges to Pakistan, there are many challenges at this time, especially of Israel, Arab, Bahrain, and Israel relations, and maybe so on. Some the next one to establish some these kinds of relations with Israel. Yes, it has impact on Pakistan directly. I will speak later. Just I want to share some views regarding this issue, Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and I hope I will contribute this answer of your question. First of all, I would like to share my views as a Pakistani national on behalf of Pakistani nation, that Pakistani nation stands by oppressed humanity, and top of them are oppressed Palestinians, brethren, and then come the both issues have important for us as a Pakistani nation. Unfortunately, non-representatives and unelected regimes have been playing dirty role against the interest of oppressed Palestinians and other nations, including Kashmir and including other issues in the world, especially in the Gulf regimes and especially in the West Asian countries. Here, I mean so-called Arab Muslim regimes who always compromised legitimate Arab Muslim interests. These monarchies and dictatorial regimes played active role protecting the interest US-led Western Bloc, while the latter always preferred Zionist interests. Western Bloc and mainly United States administration damn care human rights and democracy as well, because democratic principles require them to recognize a sovereign nation of Palestine, but they did not till now. Palestinians were majority in their ancestral land since millennia. Non-Palestinian Jews were brought here under the Zionist plot. Zionism is a racist ideology and international law forbids racism. But the US-led Western Bloc conspired and imposed racist minority of non-Palestinians, Jews, our majority in the Holy Land. That was the brutal murder of democracy. That was the brutal murder of democracy in Palestine, and the worst sort of violation of inalienable rights of Palestinians. What the world sees nowadays has nothing new because Muslims and especially Arabs bear witness to this incontrovertible fact. When US President Donald Trump so-called deal of the century in the garb of Middle East peace plan, 3 GCC Muslims Arab ambassadors had attended the event in Washington, D.C. Now, UAE and Bahrain, they have formally announced their relations and their recognition to Israel, and maybe Oman will be the next in line, follow the suit. And I think some of the little kind of states from Africa, maybe they are in the line too. However, this is one side of the entire factual scenario. No doubt, this is disappointing and disheartening. But other side of West Asian, Middle East geopolitical land gives good news. What is the good news? That keeps hopes of oppressed humanity, mainly Palestinian, alive. Fortunately, Arab world has a strong resistance force that has countered Zionist racist regimes, attacks and threats. Nobody can deny the strength of axis of resistance in Palestine, Lebanon and Syria and elsewhere, even in Yemen. The loyal son of Islamic and Arab nations have shattered the dream of greater Israel. This is undeniable success of axis of the resistance. It means the axis of resistance guarantees legitimate rights of Palestinians of occupied territories and liberation of occupied land of Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. However, axis of resistance and Palestinians needs expanded support from the entire world and particularly from Arab Islamic world. But unfortunately, some of the Arab regimes, they are betraying to whole Muslim Ummah and especially to oppressed people of Palestine. Supporter of the legitimate Palestine cause must come forward to extend all-out support for resistance to globalize this resistance. With our part of support in this global movement to counter and crush the Zionist plots. World had joined hands against South African apartheid regime, but US-led West legitimized the illegitimate racist Jewish state on Arab majority Palestine. We need to highlight these aspects and world must recognize the whole truth in this entirety. Whole trust has it. Non-Palestinian Jews had no rights to establish Israel in Palestine. Israel is a fake regime of Zionists. Election brought Hamas to power in 2007. But US and their allies, Israeli nation and murdered the democracy. Since long have been of pro-Palestine world, resistance bloc and globalize it. Regarding your question Honorable President. Yes, the relation Israel and Arab Emirates, the other regimes, these regimes, Emirates and Bahrain, they have no any geopolitical importance in the world. Unfortunately, the act of these regimes stabbing, and we strongly do condemn these acts. Regarding to impact on Pakistan, yeah, one side, these Arab regimes, especially Saudi Arabia, they are collaborating with Kushner and Jared Kushner and others regarding the deal of the century. And the other side, they are compressing and they are pressurizing to some Muslim countries like Pakistan and others to follow the same path. But very fortunately, our government from Pakistan, our Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, has categorically and prominently, he stated that Pakistan will never recognize the fake regime of Zionist Israel. It is I believe that this statement is a clear and brief message to whole world, especially to the Zionists and their now problems because they want to hide these facts, the relations between Arabs and Israel. And in these days in Pakistan, we are facing the sectarian issues, we are facing the economical issues, we are facing negative propaganda against our strongest army. These all issues linked with these developments which are happening in Gulf regimes with Israel. As you know all, finally, I would share one example, and I will leave the stage. You all people know very well that in Syria, first of all, the enemy started to destabilize the Syrian Arab army, and then they started with the Daesh. The same techniques and the maneuvers adopted by the Zionist agents and the Zionist collaborators, Arabs in Pakistan. They are creating chaos in Pakistan in multiple ways. Especially in this way, they are targeting the Pakistan army, and finally, they are targeting the Kashmir issue. They don't have interest with Palestine, so it means they don't have interest with the Kashmir issue. So we, as a Pakistani nation, we believe that every Arab regime who is making relations with the fake regime of Zionist Israel, it means they are not only betraying to Palestinian, but they are stabbing in the back of Pakistan, stabbing in the back of Kashmiri people and their struggle. And this is unforgettable and unforgivable act of these Arab regimes. And we believe and we hope they will be face difficulties in future, because Israel is not friend of any of the regime. They will crush also Arab Emirates. They will crush also Bahrain and others. Once again, thank you for the time and their distinguished guests. I'm sorry I speak a lot, and thank you to Islamabad Policy Institute and all of your team, and especially Honorable President Mr. Sajjad Bukhari sahab.
Thank you very much, Sabar Abu Mariam, for expressing your sentiments for Palestinian brothers and sisters. You have comprehensively talked about many important issues especially sectarian, economic, and the role of foreign propaganda. Then you talked about Zionist designs. And when you talk about Gulf Arab states are compromising interest of Muslim population, this gives rise to another question, and I would like to ask that question from Dr. Khalid Kulumi. The question is especially about the unity of the Arab world. I mean, Hamas has clearly turned these moves a backstep to the Palestinian cause. Recently, if we have seen at the Arab League meeting, Palestinian government presented a draft resolution that condemned UAE-Israel normalization deal, but the Arab states voted it down. Then there are reports that Palestinian Liberation Organization is considering to leave the Arab League. It is also a question mark on the effective role of OIC that was actually formed due to the Palestinian crisis. Until now, the Arab states had maintained that they would consider bilateral relations with Israel only if a permanent solution of Palestine is achieved. That is enshrined in different UN resolutions and then different peace initiatives. But now they are shaking hands, leaving Palestine in the lurch. How do you view its implications on the Palestinian cause as they wish?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you very much, brothers in IPI, for this opportunity, and regards to the all participants. Actually, to respond to your question, we need to understand that this step of what's so-called normalization, how it happened. Then we need to ask ourselves first, am I audible to everybody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah, so we need to ask ourselves, first of all, this step, whether it has been initiated by Emirates and Bahrain, or it has been initiated by somebody else. To me, I understand that we are incurring today a situation that there is a crisis, security crisis, political crisis in United States of America and in the so-called Israel. We have two figures in the name of Trump and Netanyahu. Both of them are suffering crisis. Netanyahu is facing trials of corruptions, and his society is in the street. The opposition are asking him to step down, and the situation may qualify to the fourth election. Trump, the time that he is saying those proposals, he is suffering a real crisis. Look at him, how he's dealing a logistic problem with Corona, how he is dealing with the discriminatory aspects over there between the colored people and the killing of the Floyd. Having said that, it means that there is a crisis somewhere else. They need to get out of those crises, out of this deal, through this deal. So this is what I understand. Why is this? We in Palestine, and even you, everybody knows very well that the relation between the Emirates regime and some of the Gulf regime with the Israeli entity is not from today. It has been since before. And it was not also hidden. I mean, everybody has seen the foreign minister of the Israeli regime is wandering in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. We have witnessed how Oman has received Netanyahu in Muscat. So these relations are there, and their outcome of it to harm us in Palestine are there. Hence, the question comes, why it has been announced now? It is because the crisis somewhere else. And this dictation came over those cliques at the official level in some of the Arab countries like Emirate regime and the Bahraini regime, so to fulfill those requirements. Hence, when the issue came to the Arab League and the Palestinian side has proposed into the Arab Foreign Minister Summit, which has held a week ago or few days ago, to hold an emergency meeting to discuss and denounce the step of Emirates or normalization with Israel and Bahrain. They have refused it because it's again the master. The American master is imposing his own dictation on those official regimes who has decided to be far away from their own people. Hence, when we are talking about the unity among the Arabs, well, let us talk about two major issues. One, the official stance. Second is the people stance. And by the way, for technicality, I have heard from some of our friends that are talking about Oman is the next, Oman is the next. Oman is having a declared official relation with Israel since 2004. And the office of diplomatic interest is open in Muscat since it has never been closed. Hence, I mean, there is nothing called the next Oman. Oman is there already. But back to the issue of unity. As I said, at official level, there are some people which we have witnessed in the streets in Arab countries. The people are revolting against them. Those rulers who are not even representing the desires, the demands of their own people, how they can benefit somebody else. The second thing, the people, the masses, we have seen how people in Pakistan are coming into the street, how people in Bahrain are coming into the street, revolting against this step, and even sometime, like in Bahrain, last time to oppose the business meeting in Manama, which has hosted Israeli figures, we have lost one of our beloved over there from the Bahraini citizens in those rallies, who has been killed by the regime itself. Hence, when we are talking about the stance of the Arab and the stance of the Muslim, we need to appreciate the difference between the official level and the masses level. Now, the second thing, again, come back to the question, how they have dared to challenge the creed of Muslims, the history of Muslims, the history of Arabs, Christians and Muslims in Al-Quds and in Al-Aqsa, and announce such step. Why today those monarchs, those regimes are moving forward with such step, which we can say at least say that it is a betrayal to Palestine and it has no benefit for their own people? Because simple is that our reaction as nations, as people, has came down, has been weakened. We have been involving in our daily living, and we had our own enough economic problems to think of their own ourselves, of ourselves, and not to think for with the strategic issues like the Palestinian issues, and seeing the only and one enemy of the whole ummah, that is Israel, which has its own impact, its own fingers in all these stability phenomena which we are witnessing in the region, by the way, through the soft power and through the espionage, through the Brother Saber has mentioned the chaotic activities which are being created in some of the Arab and Muslim countries. You will find in many angles that Israel is behind that. So when you appreciate the difference between those two levels, let us talk about what we can do ourselves as nations, as people, as masses in the street. We need to oppose that. The Palestinian today, for example, they have united, irrespective of their political affiliations. Whether we are in PLO, whether we are Hamas, whether we are Fatah, we have convened in Beirut and announced, all of us, that we are rejecting this step. The resistance movement, they are ready to face every step with their bodies, with their weapons, with everything which tries to sell the Palestinian rights. Hence, we are in the front line to face that enemy of Ummah. the Israeli regime. We will not come back till the last drop of our blood, and we will face that entity till its annihilation, total annihilation. I'm not talking about occupation. This thief has stolen our land, has stolen our history, has fabricated everything, and he wants today to take our rights. And the irony, today, the foreign minister of Bahrain is saying, we are doing this step for the sake of Palestinians. I tell him, brother, if you want to do a sin, do it away from Palestine. The Palestinian people did not ask you to move your army to defeat the Israelis. But don't say that this step is for the sake of the Palestinians. And this also take us to the other level. One may ask or may say that this step, everybody is thinking of his own interest, and the Emirates regime, Bahrain regime, thought that they have their interest with the relation of Israel. First of all, let us confirm that this is nothing to do with the interest of the Palestinian, because any relation with Israel, any relation with this regime, it means that you are lengthening the suffering of the Palestinian. You are giving more life supply to the Israeli criminals to commit more crimes against our people. So that is one. Second thing, now what benefit someone can think out of this relation with them? Day before yesterday, the Israeli intelligence minister, not economic minister, he has himself announced that in the coming 3-4 years, our balance trade with Emirates might reach $4 billion. Brothers, the business exchange between Emirates and their neighbors in Emirates and their neighbor in Iran reach up to $13.5 billion. So the lie of business, big lie and deception. The Emirates, if they want to get benefit out of this, they can go to their own brothers in Islam who are their neighbors and continue build up their relation, their good peaceful relation with Iran, with other Arab and Muslim countries, not to go to Israel for $4 billion in 3, 4, 5 years, upcoming 4 or 5 years. That is intelligence minister. So the question, why intelligence minister should announce this thing? Because the benefit and the outcome of this deal is a security outcome. This is what it was needed by Netanyahu and Trump from the Emirates, to safeguard their presence in the region, to be at the outskirts of their neighbors with the American bases against their own neighbors, against their Muslim neighbors, against their Arab neighbors in the Gulf. This is the thing which we have to benefit to think of it. What benefit a petroleum country can get from a small entity like Israel? This is a ridiculous thing. It has never, this normalization of relation by itself, by the way, brothers, the term itself, normalization, what does it mean? I mean, normalization means to make something not normal.
Hello?
With is 78. And now ask the Egyptians themselves, the masses themselves, about the benefits of this normalization to themselves. The figures will tell you how the Egyptian economy today, how it has deteriorated more, how the chaotic activities and instability inside Egypt is happening, and the fingers of the Israelis are there for the instability. Israel is a pure devil and evil. Is a pure devil and evil. Israel will never be in benefit of anyone. Israel entity is a short shelf item. It will never be able to continue if anyone stop, if all of those entities stop providing them with the life artery. What was needed today for us in Palestine and in all resistance IG people and countries to be united, to to refuse and reject the sectarian and ethnic differences, to be one front, to move forward, to face the only one enemy of the Ummah, that is the Israeli entity. Thank you, all of you, and sorry being late. And I'm open for any other questions or queries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid Qudumi. Indeed, very relevant, and you talked about many important aspects of the state. Talked about political crisis and how Palestinian interests are compromised, and you talked about importance of unity during these hard times. So this gives birth to another question, and I would like to ask that question from our speaker, Dr. Masood Shajare. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. You know, the Arabs are normalizing their relations with Israel, and it would definitely, as Dr. Khalid Qudumi said, would boost Donald Trump's popularity and subside the gravity of anti-Netanyahu protests going on in the region. What would be the impacts of Donald Trump again emerging victorious in the 2020 presidential elections and Netanyahu prolonging his grip on the throne of Israeli leadership? And what would be their impacts on the region and especially impacts on the Palestinian rights?
Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I answer your specific question, I would like to say that, listening to everyone, we now know, we are, all the brothers and contributors talked about the fact that this so-called normalization is not new. It's been going on for a very long time. It's just show its ugly head publicly, and we need to sort of look to see what the process of this normalization is. It's extremely important. This normalization has taken place because of the fact that these governments are so weak. They're weak because they don't have the support of their own people. They're weak because they want to hold on to this dictatorial sort of kingship that they have acquired. And that's the only thing they have in mind. And now they feel that they have to play that tune of US and Israel because of what brothers explained, the weaknesses in the United States and in Israel. They need to actually show something to their own public. Trump needs to sort of show some sort of success in Middle East. And so these puppets have to come up and actually make it public, their ongoing relationship with Israel. But why they are actually able to do this? And this is very important. They're able to do this because the normalization is not just with the leaders of these sort of client state, this dictatorship. The normalization is taking place in all different levels. The normalization, the Zionists are involved in normalization, which they did within the Christian community, which created the Christian Zionism, which Netanyahu says that is the most powerful ally. They say that the Christian Zionists in the United States are more supportive than the Zionists in the United States. So they want to repeat that. They're repeating that with the Muslims. Right now, in the West and everywhere else, through interfaith, they're actually normalizing with the Muslim clergy, with the Muslim community, and they're also offering sort of position of power because they are see themselves as gatekeeper to the power and influence in the West. And unfortunately, the first result of that is that suddenly these Muslim leaders or these leaders start silencing, and they do not talk on the issue of Palestine or indeed other areas of injustice. And this actually is the most detrimental thing. We as a community, we as activists, we have to keep our communities and our leaders accountable. We have failed in Emirat when the Emirat actually announced that Ikhwan al-Muslimin are actually a terrorist organization. Even Ikhwan al-Muslimin failed to challenge that. When in Bahrain they start killing their own citizens, we kept silence. We allowed them to actually go against their own people. The reason that you're not seeing the same thing happening some other places is because the communities and the citizens will not allow it. We actually need to strengthen the activism and the awareness of our community, and we need to protect them from normalization. And if we fail to protect them from normalization, then you will see it happen everywhere else. Even in places like Turkey, even in places like Iran, if normalization takes place among the ordinary people, then things will change. And we need to stand up. We cannot allow Bahrain and these rogue states to actually behave in that way, kill their own citizens in daylight, and the rest of us keep silence. We have to act on those bases. Now, coming back to your question, I'm sorry, I felt that I have to say this. If we don't stop this normalization of interfaith, that every Jewish organization involved in interfaith are Zionists. You know, Zionism is not a faith. Zionism is a political apartheid ideology which has got no room in any faith. Now, coming to your question, look, the fact of the matter is that you know, United States and Israel, this sort of illegal sort of apartheid system, they are in crisis. They are in a real crisis, and danger. You know, when powers are in crisis, they become more dangerous. And I think what we have to do, we again have to work on the general public. We have to stand shoulder to shoulder with those who are challenging injustices in these places. In United States currently, Black Lives Matter, standing up against the colonial systemic racism is something that we as campaigners for Palestine need to stand up for it, because this is the same thing. What's happening in Israel, the apartheid system, is based on colonial systemic racism. What they say is that, you know, Palestinians are not equal citizens. What they say is that they are subhuman. And this is what the message that they're using in their own community to motivate them to kill the Palestinians almost like as animals. And indeed, this is the heart of it. We need to challenge that level of colonial systemic racism, which is at the heart of this thing. Palestine is not just occupied land. Palestine is actually colonial base. And what is being unleashed on there is part of the colonial legacy and is the colonialism, and it needs to be tackled. What is happening in the United States is actually part of colonialism. It's not just racism. The police and the institutions in the United States are trained to behave racist because they need to protect the 1% privileged people. And if that system is going to continue, it needs to have police and institutions which actually protect the 1% to get all the benefits, be it economic, social, or political. I think we need to be understanding the causes of these issues. We need to actually be partly to one another. We need to be supporting those people who are standing against injustice in Bahrain, injustice in the United States, injustice everywhere else. And then we need to tackle the level of colonialism and racism, which is at the heart of what is happening in Palestine or United States or anywhere else. And only then we will become powerful. We need to control the out of control political systems, be it in United States or Emirates or Bahrain or Tel Aviv. I finish on this note, inshallah, unless there is another question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masood Shajri, for your very detailed presentation. Now I would move towards Mr. Ali Maher. The Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki also demanded to know why an emergency meeting of the Arab League's Council at the ministerial level was objected to. After the deal was announced last month, considering the Israel-UAE deal was an earthquake that undermines joint Arab action. Bahrain clearly objected to the wording of the draft, and it was also the first state to welcome UAE-Israel normalization. What are the factors that are causing these Arab states their inclination towards Israel, and in the recent past, and what is the stance of Pakistani?
First of all, I would like to ask you that I may explain my position in Arabic language because of our friend Dr. Khalid Khadumi is here, and also the Professor Masoud was with us, and also some of the listeners from our brothers in the Arab world. يطلب لي أن أشكر معهد إسلام آباد للأبحاث السياسية IPID بتاعت هذه الفرصة. لقد سمعت آراء مختلف الأساتذة الأفاضل والإخوة حول الأمر. ينبغي أن نفهم أولاً أن وجود ما يسمى الرأي العام الإسلامي أو ما يسمى الإرادة الإسلامية العامة، مثل هذه المصطلحات قد فقدت مصداقيتها منذ فترة، وليس من خلال شهر أو شهرين بل منذ عقود. الأمة الإسلامية، الدول أو المجتمعات أو التنظيمات المدنية أصبحت ضعيفة أو ميتة إلى درجة أنه لا أحد يحتج على مثل هذه التطورات التي لها علاقة مباشرة بأمن ومستقبل الأمة الإسلامية في المدى البعيد. يعني لو أنا أتساءل، لو كانت هناك حكومة منتخبة في مصر وهي دولة جارة لإسرائيل في هذه الفترة، هل حدث ذلك من قبل هذا التطبيق؟ لكن المشكلة لم أحد يحتج على إسقاط حكومة منتخبة في مصر آنذاك. كما أن الدول الإسلامية في مختلف أنحاء العالم حينما قامت بإدراج الجماعات الإخوان المسلمين وإدراج حركة حماس ضمن المنظمات والكيانات الإرهابية، هل احتج أحد على ذلك؟ ثم يعني أريد أن أقول بصراحة أنه ليست الدول والأنظمة الحاكمة فقط، بل مستوى الاحتجاجات والاستنكار التي لاحظناها خلال الفترة الأخيرة بعد إعلان التطبيع بين إسرائيل وبعض الدول العربية كان مستوى جدا ضعيف. يعني في السابق حينما كنا نرى أي شيء، باكستان هي دولة، العرب لا نعترف بأن باكستان هي دولة لها علاقة مباشرة بقضية فلسطين، رغم أن باكستان وقفت بجانب الدول العربية خلال الحروب، وأن باكستان القوات الجوية الباكستانية شاركت، وأنها تمكنت من إسقاط طائرات حربية إسرائيلية خلال الحروب بين العرب وإسرائيل. لكن مسألة التشاور على مستوى الأمة، على مستوى العالم الإسلامي قد انتهى. لا أحد قام بالتشاور مع باكستان حول هذا الموضوع، أن هل هناك حاجة لهذا التشاور. لأجل ذلك نحن نقول أن المؤسسات الإسلامية مثل منظمة التعاون الإسلامي والجامعة العربية انتهت وماتت. وأنا أقول بهذه المناسبة أيضا وبكل أسف أن في حين إسقاط حكومة محمد مرسي رحمه الله لا أحد احتج سوى تركيا بصورة مناسبة. حتى إيران كان رد فعلها جدا ضعيف وأيضا مجرد يعني شيء سياسي. فمن هنا يفهم أن موضوع الوحدة بين الأمة الإسلامية، بين المجتمعات الإسلامية، بين الأنظمة الحاكمة هي قضية الماضي. كل واحد يفكر في مصلحته، ليس مصلحة دولة. لكن الآن أصبحت المسألة أن الدول الإسلامية كل دولة هي أصبحت دولة قومية على غرار الدول في أوروبا وفي الغرب. لا أحد يفكر في هذا. باكستان تواصل الدعم للقضية الفلسطينية لأنها جزء من أساس دولة باكستان، لأن مؤسس باكستان هو الذي اعتبر إسرائيل دولة زائفة غير شرعية تم إقامتها على أراضي فلسطينيين وبالقوة. لأجل ذلك نحن نواصل، وأيضا نواصل دعم الفلسطينيين لأن هناك قضية مماثلة في كشمير، نفس حق تقرير المصير أيضا. لأجل ذلك لكن المشكلة على مستوى الأمة، على مستوى العالم الإسلامي والمنظمات الإسلامية أو منظمة التعاون الإسلامي، ما في هناك تعاطف للقضايا الإسلامية، لا لفلسطين ولا لكشمير ولا للشعب الروهينجيا. فهناك حاجة ملحة لأن منظماتنا الإسلامية، المنظمات والأحزاب السياسية في الدول الإسلامية التي تتمتع بنوع من الحرية والديمقراطية مثل باكستان، في إندونيسيا، في ماليزيا، ينبغي أن نهتم بإعداد رأي عام تجاه هذه القضايا وأهمية هذه القضايا للمستقبل السياسي للأمة الإسلامية أو نقول لجميع الدول الإسلامية. لأن الهدف من الحروب القائمة بين الدول الإسلامية، الصراعات السياسية والصراعات المسلحة في يمن أو في أي مكان آخر، هدفها هدف واحد، وهو كيف يمكن تأمين وحماية دولة إسرائيل الغير شرعية. لأن هذه الحروب هي توفر وهي تتيح فرصة لإسرائيل بأن كل دولة إسلامية مجبرة أو مضطرة إلى التطبيق مع هذا. اليمن، حرب اليمن معناها السيطرة على جزيرة سقطرى، معنى ذلك السيطرة على الخطوط الملاحة الرئيسية والهامة في المنطقة. معنى ذلك لو تم إقامة قواعد استخباراتية وعسكرية لإسرائيل في سقطرى، معنى هناك تهديد أمني مباشر لدول مثل إيران ودول مثل باكستان، سيطرة إسرائيل على الملاحة التجارية البحرية في هذا. فمسؤولية الدول أو مسؤولية الحكومات هي قد انتهت. الآن مسؤولية الكيانات، الأحزاب السياسية والتنظيمات مثل حماس، ينبغي أن نقوم من جديد بتنظيم حملات لخلق نهضة بين الشعوب الإسلامية، بين الشباب، لمعرفة ما يحدث في العالم الإسلامي العربي وكيف سيكون مصير هذه الدول المسلمة المسكينة مستقبلا. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, Ali Meher, for your comprehensive and detailed insights in Arabic language. I think it looks like we have covered the main items of meeting today. Still, if there is any comment our panelists attendees can make it now. I think there is no comment also. Okay, I would like to thank our panelists and other attendees for joining us here at IPI. Thank you for attending.
Sorry, if you allow me. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I will not take much of your time. I would like to thank a brother who has greeted us in Arabic also. और मैं आपके ज़बान में भी बोलना चाहता हूँ कि जी आपने बहुत ही अच्छी बात की. मैं आपके साथ भी एग्री करता हूँ कि अभी वाकई कि हमारा के अरब यूनिटी OIC और ये सारी जो इंस्टीट्यूशंस बेसिकली के वो सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर की बात के इस्टेब्लिशमेंट हो गई. लेकिन मैं आपको सर ये बताता हूँ कि अरब नेशंस जो है ना वो सारी के सारी के इनके एक ही हम है और इनका एक ही गम है. सिर्फ हम ये नहीं है अपना आप को खोसना का छोड़ देते हैं और हमें ये करना चाहिए कि जी हमें क्या करना है. हम आवाम के सतह पर हम क्या कर सकते हैं क्योंकि ये गवर्नमेंट से ना सर हमने पहले से भी देखा फ़लस्तीन में कश्मीर में कम से कम कश्मीर में तो एक पाकिस्तान होता है लेकिन हम वाकई इधर फ़लस्तीन में तो एक पाकिस्तान है ही नहीं है. अब दुआ करें कि कोई ऐसे ज़लज़ला आ जाए कि हम आपके नेबर हो जाएंगे फिर कहीं हमें हौसला हो जाएगा. ठीक है तो इसीलिए कि मैं आपका वाकई शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ. लेकिन मैं आपको ये बताता हूँ हमारा जो फ़लस्तीनी अवाम है आखिरी दम तक वो सादगी है और इसके सब्र और तहम्मुल के साथ है. इनका एक ही हदफ है कि इसराइल को नाबूद करना है. और जितने भी आप देख रहे हैं कि हमारे रीजन में इसराइल उससे दूर नहीं है इसीलिए कि मुश्तरका तौर पे हमें इस इसराइल को सामना करेंगे. शुक्रिया कि आपका वक्त को भी ले लिया है कि और शायद मेरे हिस्सा से ज़्यादा भी लिया. थैंक यू वेरी मच एवरीबॉडी.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much.